The deputy smacked a 17-year-old girl in the middle of open court. People gasped, then froze. No one stood, no one shouted, just stunned silence. What followed flipped the room on its head. Lena Park had been anchored to the last bench in courtroom 12B for 3 straight hours. Her coffee was lifeless. Her notebook brimmed with tidy notations, arrows, and underlined names. Her patience had a hairline crack. She nudged her watch, a discreet device disguised as ordinary stainless steel, quietly recording. The audio feed was pristine. Live video flowed straight to FBI technicians across town. After 6 months of legwork, today would either stitch her case together or shred it completely. The courtroom was the building's worst-kept secret. Everyone said so. Paint scabbed off the walls in curling strips. The air conditioning had surrendered 2 years back and never returned. A stubborn clock above the judge's bench had been paused since 2019, hands fixed like an accusation. This was the graveyard room where unwanted dockets went to disappear, cases with poor kids, brown kids, the people the system pretended not to see. Lena watched the entrance like a hawk. At exactly 2:47 p.m., the door creaked and the defendant appeared. She felt her spine tighten. Everything moving in the room seemed to sharpen. The next minutes would matter more than the last 6 months. Kira Wilson was smaller than Lena expected, 17, barely 5 feet, wiry but steady. Her natural hair was looped into a no-nonsense ponytail. Her school blouse was wrinkled, like it had been slept in. A split lip swelled purple. Dark bands bruised her wrists where the cuffs had gnawed. But her eyes were the thing. Cool, alert, taking inventory. Most kids dragged into 12B looked rattled, furious, or hollowed out. Kira looked like she was solving an equation silently. The bailiff, Officer Paul Grant, steered her to the defense table. Grant was gentler than most, a soft-spoken outlier. Lena had clocked him for weeks. Among the few decent ones, he hovered near the top. "Easy," Grant murmured, as he eased Kira into the chair. "You all right?" She gave a small nod, voice held in reserve. Lena flipped open her folder and rechecked the record. 3 days earlier, Kira had been trudging home from school when her life bent sideways. Outside Dawson's Market on Fifth Avenue, she watched Officer Martin Rios, a 14-year veteran with 19 complaints gathering dust, approach an elderly black man named Harold Robinson. Mr. Robinson was 84, living with dementia. He moved carefully with a cane that his grandson had carved from a fallen cherry branch. That afternoon, he'd gotten disoriented, wandered from his daughter's house, and stopped lost in a loop. Someone had called about a suspicious person. Officer Rios rolled up, clocked an old black man with a cane, and apparently decided that was provocation enough. The whole interaction took under 2 minutes. Rios came in hot, barking questions the old man couldn't untangle fast enough. When Mr. Robinson didn't answer on command, Rios seized his forearm. The old man reflexively tried to pull free. Rios drove both palms into his chest. An 84-year-old with a cane, it doesn't rebound from a shove like that. Mr. Robinson pitched backward, skull-cracking sidewalk. His cane skittered into the gutter. Blood flowered beneath his head. That's when Kira lifted her phone and hit record. She didn't rush toward Rios. She didn't heckle. She stood 30 feet away, framed him and the fallen man, and filmed. The footage was crisp. Ambient noise was clean. It caught a uniformed officer using needless force on a fragile stranger who threatened no one. Rios spotted Kira filming. He shouted for her to stop. She didn't. He closed the distance, ordering her to delete the clip. She stepped backward, raised the phone higher, and kept the lens steady. "Shut that off," Rios barked. "Now!" "Public sidewalk," Kira replied, steady as a level. "I'm allowed to record." "You're interfering with police business." "I'm documenting police business," she said, voice flat and calm. Rios swiped for her phone. Kira snapped it away. In the struggle, he slammed her against a parked sedan, splitting her lip and bruising her ribs, but she clamped onto the device like a vice. By the time backup rolled up, Kira was cuffed, and Rios was telling anyone listening that she'd lunged at him. Mr. Robinson was in an ambulance, rushing toward stitches, 12 of them, while sirens stitched the air. The video caught fire online in hours, but accountability didn't. Instead of Rios facing suspension, Kira's name landed on a charging sheet, disturbing the peace, interfering with police, resisting. Lena closed the folder and scanned the room's fixtures like a map. She recognized everyone now. Judge Helena Miles, on the bench for 12 years, had the practiced chill of someone who never second-guessed a ruling. 61. Unmarried. Lived alone with 3 cats and a mountain of judicial conferences, known for tough on crime, which here meant tough on the accused and relaxed about badges. In 12 years, she'd never once grounded a ruling in favor of a civil rights complaint against officers. Not once. The prosecutor, Daniel Cho, 33, Harvard-trained, the office's rising blade. He prided himself on never dropping a case against a teenager. His win rate was 94%, shinier until you saw how many frightened kids took pleas. Kira's attorney was Sophia Marquez, fresh from law school, carrying $190,000 in loans, and 39 clients balanced across color-coded tabs. 28, idealistic, and visibly stretched thin. This was her 5th real case, and terror kept slipping into her expression like a draft under a door. At 3:15 p.m., Judge Miles swept in. Everyone rose. Lena noticed the judge never once looked at Kira as she centered her papers, squared edges, and measured the room with no warmth. "Court is in session," she said. "The people versus Kira Wilson. Mr. Cho, proceed." Daniel Cho stood, smoothing a tailored navy suit that cost more than a month of most folks' bills. His opening was polished, frictionless, and allergic to the facts. "Your Honor, this case is about respect for law and order." The defendant intentionally disrupted a lawful intervention. He recast what happened outside Dawson's Market as a routine welfare check on a disoriented senior. Lena underlined that phrase, welfare check, in her notebook. New spin. "Miss." Wilson initiated filming without permission, creating a hazardous distraction during a delicate interaction. When Officer Rios attempted to explain, she grew combative and disregarded lawful commands. Combative. Lena circled it twice. He had no choice but to detain her for her safety and the safety of others. She resisted while continuing to interfere. Cho's cadence was courtroom theater, effortless and glib. Lena glanced at Kira, who sat perfectly still, hands folded, a statue with a pulse. Only her jaw told the story, tightening by degrees with each lie that slid across marble floors like spilled oil. Cho tied off his statement with flourish. "We cannot allow civilians to compromise police work because they object to it, and we cannot allow teenagers to imagine they're above the law." Judge Miles nodded, satisfied. "Thank you, Mr. Cho." Miss Marquez. Opening Sophia rose on uncertain legs. She looked at her notes, then her client, then the bench. When she started, you could barely hear the words. But they came, careful and sincere as stitches. "Your Honor, my client is a 17-year-old honor student walking home when she believed she saw police misconduct. She exercised her constitutional right to record in public. She never touched the officer, never raised her voice. She stood 30 feet away and documented what unfolded." Sophia inhaled, found steadier footing. The video speaks clearly. It shows an 84-year-old man with a cane shoved backward without provocation. It shows my client quietly recording from a safe distance. Nothing about her conduct interfered with anything. The judge looked bored, examining her pen like it held the day's real intrigue. "Thank you, Miss Marquez." "Mr. Cho, call your first witness. The people call Officer Martin Rios." Rios rose from the gallery, big-shouldered, 6'3", 220, radiating authority like a space heater. His uniform creased with military precision, badge bright, boots reflecting ceiling lights, 12 commendations, Little League coach on Saturdays, a wife, 2 kids, the brochure version of a public servant. Lena knew better. She'd shadowed his career for months, pulling threads. 19 complaints were only the visible ice. She'd surfaced at least 35 more incidents never filed, disproportionately against people of color, often involving gratuitous force. The same gears that protected him now had smothered those stories. He placed his palm on the Bible and swore. Lena had to fight a laugh at the choreography of it. Cho guided him like a careful director, every question sanded smooth to frame Rios as measured, reasonable, patient, and to paint Kira as volatile. Officer, what happened the afternoon of October 15th? We got a call about a suspicious loiterer at Dawson's Market. I located an elderly gentleman who seemed confused, standing in the flow of foot traffic. Your response? I approached calmly, asked if he needed assistance. He wasn't coherent, so I gently steered him toward a bench. Lena wrote, gently steered, in the margins. And then the defendant appeared. She began yelling accusations. Did you feel threatened? I was concerned for safety. She agitated the situation. A crowd gathered. It was escalating. What did you do next? Cho asked. I tried to de-escalate, Rios said. I explained I was helping the gentleman, but her filming agitated him further. She ignored my instructions. Did she comply? No, she grew more aggressive, accused me of brutality with no basis. When I moved to arrest her for interference, she resisted. How? She jerked away. Attempted to flee. I used minimal force. Through it all, Kira's face barely changed, but her fingers curled into tight fists against her skirt. Cho kept the questions rolling for 20 minutes, an immaculate script that sanitized everything. Each falsehood landed with the weight of ritual, practiced and unblinking, designed to stick. Finally, it was cross-examination. Sophia stood, knuckles pale around her legal pad. Officer Rios, you testified. You gently steered Mr. Robinson to a bench. That's your statement? Yes. You also said he blocked foot traffic in the middle of the sidewalk? Correct. Sophia collected a manila envelope from the evidence table. Your Honor, the defense seeks to admit the recording made by Ms. Wilson Cho leaped up. Objection. The video is unclear, possibly edited, and unauthenticated. Judge Miles barely tilted her head. Sustained. The video is inadmissible. Lena felt her stomach drop, though she'd expected this dance. Clear footage tossed on a technicality. Predictable, and still outrageous enough to sting. Sophia blinked like she'd been splashed with cold water. Your Honor, the video clearly... Ms. Marquez, the judge cut in, voice flat. I've ruled. Move on. Without the video, the defense was walking a tightrope with no net. Officer, how many complaints have been filed against you in 5 years? Objection, Cho said instantly. Relevance. Sustained. Have you ever been investigated for excessive force? Objection. Sustained. Line after line collapsed. Every attempt to show history or pattern was blocked, smothered before it could breathe. The young attorney was flailing, and everyone knew it. After 15 minutes of rejected questions, Sophia swallowed, pinned her notes, and returned to the defense table, cheeks flushed. Redirect? The judge asked. No, Your Honor, Cho said, owning the moment. Officer Rios's testimony speaks for itself. He stepped down, returning to his seat. As he passed Kira, he let his eyes rest on her, the hint of a smirk curving like a paper cut. The people rest, Cho announced. Judge Miles turned to Sophia. Defense? Any witnesses? Sophia stood, smoothing her jacket. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Kyra Wilson. Kira rose slowly. The witness chair seemed too big, like furniture built for someone twice her size. She placed her hand on the Bible, shoulders square, and swore. Her voice did not wobble. It landed clean, unafraid. Miss Wilson, Sophia began softly. What did you see on October 15th? I was walking home from school, Kira said, when I saw Officer Rios with an older man outside Dawson's Market. The man looked confused and frightened. He held a cane. He moved very slowly. What did the officer do? He was raising his voice, firing questions. The man looked lost. He kept saying, I don't know. Then Officer Rios grabbed his arm. And then, the man tried to pull away and the officer shoved him hard in the chest. What happened? He fell back and hit his head. There was blood. Kyra's tone never lifted. The words alone carried the impact. What did you do next? Sophia asked. I took out my phone and recorded, Kira answered. I thought evidence might make someone believe me. Did you approach Officer Rios? No, I stayed about 30 feet away. Did you yell? No, I didn't speak until he noticed me recording and walked over. What did he say? He told me to stop and delete the video. I said I was on a public sidewalk and had a right to record. Then what? He grabbed for my phone. When I pulled it back, he slammed me into a parked car. That's how I got hurt. The room was silent except for the tired ceiling fan. Kira's story was compact, transparent, and painfully plausible, but Lena could see it meant little here. The judge's gaze drifted. The prosecutor sharpened his notes. Rios reclined like a man in the right pew for the wrong sermon. When Sophia finished, Cho rose, cross-examination already sharpened to a point. His game was obvious. Scrape at credibility, paint bias, make a calm teenager look calculating. Miss Wilson, he began, smile without warmth. You've never been particularly fond of police, have you? I don't hold an opinion about all police. But you've made negative comments on social media? Sophia objected. The judge waved it along like a gnat. Have you posted negative statements about law enforcement? Cho repeated. I've shared articles about reform, Kira said. So you came predisposed to think Officer Rios was doing wrong. I saw an old man get shoved, she replied. That's what I saw. But you admit prior negative feelings? I believe people with power should be accountable. Cho nodded as if he'd trapped her. So when you saw an officer helping a confused gentleman, you immediately assumed misconduct. He wasn't helping, Kira said steady. He pushed him. That's your interpretation. Yet you admit bias, the exchange stretched on, 30 minutes of needling questions and clean answers. Kira never lied, even when truth complicated things. When Cho finally sat down, Kira was released to the defense table. Your Honor, Sophia said, rubbing her thumb along the pad's spiral. The defense rests. Judge Miles checked the frozen clock out of habit, then glanced at her wristwatch instead. It's 4:45. We'll recess briefly before closing's benches creaked. People stood. The room exhaled stale air and impatience. Lena stayed planted. She watched Kira alone at the table and Sophia rummaging for a closing that would likely bounce off granite. Rios stretched lazily, confidence settling on him like a fitted jacket. The afternoon light through the high windows had that dull, sallow color the building seemed to prefer. During the recess, whispers moved like static. A clerk joked too loudly near the doorway. The court reporter massaged her wrists, then her temples, then typed a few test strokes as if warming up for another mile. Grant leaned on the rail, eyes on Kira, with a quiet worry he didn't make a show of. Lena's watch hummed as data streamed, timestamps, bitrate, battery health, while the recorded feed pinged across town to a hardened room flush with monitors. She thought about the timeline she'd assembled, every complaint number, every redacted page. If today collapsed, she'd rebuild. But there was a window here, small, hairline, but real, where everything could flip with one gesture. The gesture came from arrogance. Rios stepped closer to the defense table, stretching that smirk again. He said something under his breath only Kira could hear. Her face didn't change. Her hands stayed still. Grant at the rail lifted his chin, a soft warning that Rios ignored. Across the room, a mother tried to soothe a toddler with a crinkled packet of crackers. The judge's clerk re-entered with a stack of files that wobbled and nearly slid. The bailiff posted by the door stifled a yawn. Lena absorbed it all because details tell you where leverage is hiding. And then the door behind the bench clicked. Everybody rose again, as ritual demands. When court resumed, fatigue had settled like dust. The judge invited closings. Cho delivered the state's argument with glossy confidence. Law and order, respect, safety deference. He had a way of turning imprecision into certainty. Every soft assertion landed like a fact. He framed Kira as reckless, disruptive, dangerous by implication more than deed. He cast Rios as patient, harried, professional, the stalwart adult keeping chaos at bay. Lena watched the jurist's posture, still, chin slightly raised, eyes sliding along the polished wood rather than the speaker's face. When Cho finished, Sophia rose. Her first words snagged on a breath. Then she found rhythm, modest but honest, built on what remained. Your Honor, Sophia said, this isn't complicated. A teen recorded public conduct from a safe distance. Recording is both legal and necessary. If the state's story were true, they wouldn't fear the video. They'd want you to see it. She paced slowly, measured. We have no outbursts, no contact, no threat. We have a camera and a voice stating rights plainly. She paused. The law doesn't bend just because the badge says so. It bends when the facts demand it. And the facts, even without the clip, show overreach and retaliation. It wasn't theatrical. It was earnest. In 12Bs, that often wasn't enough, but sincerity carries further than many expect. Still, the judge's expression barely flexed. Alina felt the tilt of inevitability returning like a tide. She thought of the months behind her, interviews, sketched maps, the picture of a department that punished witnesses and protected patterns. She thought of Dawson's Market's cracked sidewalk, the rusted gutter where the cane spun. In her mind, she could freeze the video on any frame. She could show angles, annotate trajectories, but inside this room, the thing that would settle everything sat locked outside the door. Nothing further, Sophia said, voice even. The judge nodded, like someone easing a drawer shut. Then she reached for the next step, unaware the room's energy was about to fracture. The fracture began somewhere small. The court reporter asked for a date to be repeated. Cho provided it too quickly. The judge asked again. Cho slowed down, supplied it properly. A chuckle flickered near the back. Grant's radio crackled and then found silence. Kira adjusted the cuff of her sleeve and winced. Lena's pen stopped moving. All she could hear was the hum of the light and the slow churn of the air system that technically didn't work but still pressed warm air around the ankles. Somewhere outside, sirens arced faintly down Fifth. It felt like a countdown you couldn't see, the moment before the first drop of a summer storm. Then came the shove of fate. An older spectator, annoyed by the heat, stood and started toward the exit before the judge excused anyone. Grant moved to intercept, calm and professional. The man bristled. Voices overlapped. Rios, never missing a chance to project control, stuck his nose in a situation that required none of his authority. Sit down, he barked, loud enough to bounce off plaster. The man flinched, then obeyed. Eyes down, Grant's jaw flexed. This was his courtroom to manage. Rios had peeled away his lane again. Small as it seemed, the exchange laid bare the dynamic. A man accustomed to dominance, unwilling to let any moment pass unclaimed. Judge Miles called for order with the weary authority of a teacher managing last period. Her gavel ticked the wood, a light tap, more suggestion than threat. We will proceed, she said, and reached for the next file. The hum reset. Lena glanced at her watch. Battery still strong. Transmission steady. She tagged the moment mentally. They were back on script, but everyone had felt the tremor. That's often how systems topple, she'd learned, through a chain of moments that look minor until one of them lands like a hammer. She slid a sticky tab along the edge of her folder, aligning evidence numbers. She was ready for what came next. Cho stood again, angling for a brisk, tidy finish. Your Honor, the facts are sufficient. We ask for a finding consistent with the people's case, clean, antiseptic language. He wanted a straight line from accusation to judgment. Before the judge could respond, Sophia rose. Your Honor, a very brief request, an opportunity to proffer the video for the record, even if not admitted, for appellate purposes. It was procedural, restrained. The judge frowned, impatient. Denied. A small sound left the defense table, air leaving someone who'd held it too long. Lena watched Kira's mouth set. Defeat didn't sit on her. Resolve did. Lena felt the same iron click into place behind her sternum. Because here's the thing. While the court could keep a video out, it couldn't erase witnesses who'd seen it before it was scrubbed by an algorithm, saved by others, mirrored by thousands. And Lena had a feed of her own, angles the courtroom couldn't obstruct. She wasn't going to stand up and declare it. That wasn't her role today. But she could lay tracks. She could make sure the next step had something solid beneath it. The judge turned a page, ready to rule. The room leaned forward like a collective held breath. Lena had the uncanny sensation of standing at a cliff's lip when pressing her back, gravity whispering up. The judge began, each word placed with the deliberation of a chess move. Having considered testimony and argument, the door to the side corridor cracked open. A latecomer poked in, realized their mistake, and retreated. A tiny interruption, nothing more, yet it broke the cadence. The judge paused, annoyed. Having considered, a cough rattled the gallery. Grant shot a glance toward the source. The judge's eyes closed for a measured beat, then opened like shutters. The defense has not... She stopped again because something else had shifted. Lena couldn't name it at first. Then she realized Kira was no longer merely enduring. She was measuring, choosing, readying herself to speak. But Kira didn't interrupt the judge. She turned, very slightly, to look at Grant. He gave the smallest nod, permission to breathe, not permission to talk. Rios noticed and bristled. He leaned forward, forearms planted, asserting presence like a weight. The judge resumed, determined to wrestle the proceedings back inside the rails. The defense has not met its burden to overcome the people's showing with admissible evidence. The last phrase hung like a dare. Admissible. Lena could feel the word in the bones of the room, in its damp walls, an unmoving clock. There are days when language is a shield. There are days when it's a cage. Today it was both. Sophia rose again, gently. Your Honor, before any ruling, may I make an offer of proof? Ms. Marquez, the judge said sharply, sit down. The heat made tempers brittle. The judge's tone cut. The gallery stiffened. Rios smiled without showing teeth. Lena's pen tapped twice. She wasn't writing. She was timing. She thought of Mr. Robinson's cane, the carved cherry turns rubbed smooth by an old man's hand. She imagined him at home now, a bandage like a white flag across his scalp, a daughter hovering with tea and quiet questions. Systems count on forgetfulness. They rely on people moving on. Lena had never been talented at letting things go. Proceed, the judge said at last, voice cooled by effort. The court finds... Boom! The side door swung wider, colliding with the wall. Not an earthquake, just a courier with bad timing and a dolly stacked in over-ambitious columns. Files teetered, a binder slid and slapped tile. Everyone startled the way people do when reminded that gravity still rules the room. Grant moved, steady and efficient. We're in session, he said softly, corralling the intrusion. The courier flushed, apologized, reversed. The judge exhaled, pinched the bridge of her nose, then signaled for the record to resume. Small chaos sometimes dislodges bigger truths. Lena felt the hinge turn, subtle but undeniable. The judge began again, patience depleted. The court finds sufficient cause to... Your Honor, Sophia interjected, gentle but insistent. May the record reflect that Mr. Robinson's condition is relevant to necessity and proportionality. The judge's mouth tightened. It will not. Sophia nodded, sat. Rios relaxed, triumphant. He turned his head and let his gaze graze Kira like a scar. That was the misstep, because in that split second arcing between arrogance and glee, something living in the room stood up. Not a person, an idea. Grant noticed first. His shoulders squared. Lena's pulse beat in her ears, not from fear but from recognition. This was the breath before a curtain rises, the hush that makes sound possible. What happened next wasn't scripted, but it was inevitable. The older spectator, who'd earlier tried to leave, sweaty, flustered, embarrassed, spoke out of turn. Judge, ma'am, he blurted, that girl never touched nobody. I seen it online, gasps, a reprimand. Silence! The judge snapped, gavel sharp. Grant moved toward the man, gently urging him down, but words, once loose, mutate. Someone else muttered, "Let them show it then." Another voice, "If it's the truth, what's the harm?" The judge's stare iced the room. Any further outbursts and the gallery will be cleared. Quiet fell. A brittle shell over simmering heat. Rios looked pleased. He liked contests he believed were already won. Lena didn't stand. She didn't speak. She simply breathed and let her training run the play. Her watch ticked at her wrist, a whisper of metal. The stream was already secured off-site, compartmentalized, and backed up. The point wasn't to grandstand here. The point was to hold a system to the light until it blinked. She thought of a rule an old mentor drilled into her. Powers that pretend omnipotence often crumble when they press just a hair too far. Rios was pressing. The judge, by reflex, was shielding. The room, however, had tasted dissent. It wouldn't forget the flavor quickly. That, Lena knew, is how tides turn. The judge looked like she wanted a nap and a new job. Instead, she opted for control. Bailiff, clear the gallery at the first sign of disruption. Grant's eyes flicked to Kira, then back to the room. Yes, Your Honor. The temperature felt like it rose. Cho shuffled papers, smoothing corners a second time, an old superstition for luck. Sophia touched Kira's sleeve and left her hand there a beat. It looked like comfort and also a promise. I'm not leaving you. The light through the high windows shifted, turning marginally gold, a false suggestion of relief. Lena logged the minute, the texture of the air, the pitch of the silence. Cho stood to request a formal admonishment of the gallery. The judge obliged, a clipped speech about decorum and contempt. As she spoke, Rios adjusted his belt, then the strap on his shoulder mic. A little theater to remind everyone who wore the hardware. Kira didn't watch him. She stared at the bench, unblinking. When the judge finished, she said, "We will proceed directly to a ruling." That sentence had gravity. People sank slightly in their seats. Even Rios stopped fiddling. In the space before the next word, Lena felt every mile of the last 6 months, late nights, cold coffee, stubborn witnesses, the stubborn truth, click into alignment like teeth on a key. The court finds, the judge's voice carried, deliberate. Then a sound snapped the line. A sharp, involuntary cry from someone in the first row. Grant stepped, palm raised, quieting the flare. The judge's jaw worked. The court finds sufficient reason to accept the people's narrative as... The lights flickered. Just once. Not a power outage, just a hiccup. Enough to reset everyone's eyes. The clock above the bench, dead since 2019, remained frozen. An unhelpful witness. Rios smirked again, reflexive. Kira inhaled through her nose and released it. Sophia's fingers curled against the legal pad, leaving faint crescents in the cardboard. Lena wrote nothing. She memorized the geometry of faces. The judge lifted the gavel. This was it, the tap that would anoint a false story as official. Grant's radio burped a low tone and then quieted. Somewhere down the hall, shoes squeaked against waxed linoleum. Lena felt the hummingbird flutter of adrenaline, but kept her expression neutral. She has learned never to give power the satisfaction of seeing your heartbeat. The gavel hung in the air. A moment, stretched taut. Then the door from chambers cracked again, just a hair, and a clerk leaned in to hand the judge a note.
The judge read it, blinked, folded it, and said nothing. The gavel lowered to the block but did not strike. Time resumed, but slower. We will take a brief recess before issuing the ruling, the judge said, tone thin as paper. She stood. Everyone rose, confusion rustling through fabric and whispers. Grant announced, "All rise," with a voice that landed like a kindness rather than a bark. When the judge disappeared, the room deflated. Cho turned to Rios, speaking low, confident. Rios rolled his shoulders and chuckled. Sophia squeezed Kira's hand. Kira squeezed back. Lena checked her watch. The stream remained flawless. Text from a number she trusted blinked across her phone. Got it. Secure. She exhaled in relief, then slipped the phone away, face calm as winter glass. During the break, the tenor shifted. People didn't leave. They lingered, stirring the air with guesses. What was the note? Is the old man okay? Will they show the video? Rios pretended boredom, but his jaw ticked, microscopic, telling. Cho checked his tie in a reflection he conjured from a glossy file cover. Grant paced a slow arc, eyes sweeping, cataloguing. Lena did not move. She thought of Mr. Robinson's daughter, who had voiced gratitude and fear in equal measure on the phone. She thought of the cane in the gutter. She thought of every kid who learned young that a camera can be an anchor and a bullseye at once. As the courtroom gradually emptied for recess, Lena stayed seated and still. She watched Kira alone at the defense table, Sophia riffling through notes to draft a closing that probably wouldn't touch the bench's armor. Rios rose and stretched, relaxed as a lion digesting. He looked certain the ending was already written. Lena's watch hummed with its quiet, relentless pulse. She studied the window's thin light, the dust motes drifting like sleepy planets, the stubborn clock that refused to move. Her case had always been built for the long run, not the afternoon. Still she could feel something loosening, an old hinge creaking. The story wasn't over. It was finally awake. He drifted toward the water cooler beside the defense table. As he passed Kira, he leaned close and hissed something too soft for Lena to catch, but Kira's shoulders tightened like a pulled wire. Rios straightened, pressed the lever, and drank long, the gurgle loud in the quiet room. On his way back, he paused again. The fluorescent light skimmed his badge. His smile was small and mean, the kind a bully wears when he thinks everyone's stuck watching. Grant glanced up from the rail, uncertain. Sophia froze with her legal pad half raised. The court reporter's fingers hovered over the keys. Kira's gaze stayed forward. Her face was composed, but her chest rose once, controlled, like she'd counted to 3 and decided not to move an inch.
You know your problem, Rios said, pitched low, but not secret. You don't know your place. Kira looked at him. What's my place? Quiet, invisible, like you're supposed to be. He lifted his hand and slapped her, fast, open palm, a crack that ricocheted off faded plaster like a snapped board. Time stalled. Sophia's pen clattered to tile. The court reporter stopped mid-stroke. Even Grant stilled, shocked into stillness by the audacity of it. Kira's head whipped, then returned slowly to front and center, eyes unblinking. Heat gathered in her cheek, red blooming under old bruises. The room held its breath, as if oxygen had been rationed, as if sound needed permission to return. A slick line of blood purled along Kira's split lip, reopening the wound. She raised cuffed hands, dabbed the blood away with the back of a knuckle, never breaking eye contact. That was a mistake, she said, voice quiet, steady. The kind that rings truer than a shout. Rios laughed, a dry bark. What are you gonna do, kid? Tell your mommy? Kira didn't blink. I don't have to do anything, she said. She will. She tipped her chin toward the aisle. Rios, confused, followed her gaze. Lena was already rising, every movement deliberate, like each muscle had been told a task, and was eager to obey it. Lena walked the center aisle, heels clicking like metronome beats. The few remaining spectators parted instinctively. Grant's eyes widened. He didn't step in. Sophia's breath leaked out, almost a prayer. When Lena reached Rios, she stopped an arm's length away, her face composed, her voice level. Officer Rios, she said, you're under arrest. Rios's confusion snapped into anger. Who the hell are you? Lena slid a leather case from inside her jacket, flipped it open so the seal caught the light. Special Agent Lena Park, FBI, Civil Rights and Public Corruption. The badge was not a bluff. Neither was the calm in her hands or the camera humming on her wrist. "You can't," he started. "I can," she said, "and I am." Her tone never rose. "You're under arrest for assault, color of law violations, and conspiracy to deprive rights." The door behind the bench clicked. Judge Helena Miles reappeared, eyebrows lifted, fury and disbelief knitted tight. "Agent Park," she said sharply, "this is highly irregular. You don't interrupt my courtroom." Lena turned, meeting the bench without flinching. "Your Honor, I've been running a federal probe into corruption in this courthouse for 6 months. What we all witnessed just now is an on-the-record assault of a minor, retaliation against a witness, and obstruction layered on top." She opened a folder, crisp tabs flaring like flags. "Officer Martin Rios has been the subject of a federal inquiry tied to 19 formal complaints and 35 additional incidents of documented excessive force. We have corroboration of a pattern that disproportionately targets vulnerable residents." Miles flushed, fury blooming from neck to cheekbones. "I demand authorization." Lena stepped to the bench and laid a signed federal warrant on the wood. "Order authorizing investigation into corruption in the 3rd District Court, signed by Chief Judge Catherine Monroe." She pivoted back to the room. "The inquiry extends to prosecutorial discretion and judicial handling of civil rights claims. Mr. Cho," Lena continued, eyes on the prosecutor, "has repeatedly declined to prosecute police misconduct, dismissing or bargaining down 14 cases involving civil rights in 18 months. Cho found his voice brittle. This is harassment. I followed office policy." "Covering crimes isn't a policy," Lena said evenly. "It's complicity." She scanned the bench. "Judge Miles has dismissed every civil rights action before her over the last 3 years. Statistically extraordinary, contextually telling." The side door opened. 2 agents in dark suits stepped in, Rodriguez and Kim, moving with practiced economy. Lena didn't look away from Rios. "Agents, take him." Rios backed up, palms angled out, like a man bargaining with a mirror. "Hold on, wait." "We can talk." Agent Rodriguez approached with cuffs. "Martin Rios, you're under arrest for assault under color of law and conspiracy to violate civil rights. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda cadence rolled, calm and inexorable. Rios kept scanning faces, hunting for rescue that wasn't coming. Judge Miles stared at the warrant like it had teeth. Cho fumbled with his briefcase, fingers trembling. "This is a setup," Rios shouted as the agents turned him toward the side door. "All of this is a setup." The words sounded smaller once he wasn't centered in the room. Lena watched him go, then faced the bench. "Judge Miles, you are suspended from the docket pending federal review. Agent Kim will interface with court administration to secure your calendar." Miles tried to square her authority. "You don't storm my courtroom and seize the wheel." "I have rights." "You do," Lena said, "and you'll exercise them at your disciplinary hearing." Cho slid for the exit, shoulders hunched. "Mr. Cho," Lena called, not raising her voice, "don't leave town. A federal subpoena will reach you within 48 hours. He paused at the threshold, but didn't turn, a line of tension running down his spine you could have plucked like a string. With the immediate rot addressed, Lena turned to the only person who hadn't flinched. Kira still sat cuffed at the table, eyes bright, breath measured. "Miss!" "Marquez," Lena said. "Uncuff your client." Sophia's hands shook as she located the key. The cuff snapped open. The sound was a small freedom. Kira rubbed the marks at her wrists, then looked up. "How long were you watching?" 6 months, Lena said. "Your video of Mr.?" Robinson's assault triggered the probe. We needed to see scope, and actors. Kira's mouth edged into a dry half-smile. "So I was bait?" Lena's face softened. "You were brave. We set guardrails. I'm sorry one of them failed today." "Didn't feel protected when he hit me," Kira said, factual, not self-pitying. "I know," Lena answered, and the apology sounded like metal. "He'll answer for it. All charges against you are dismissed. You're free." Kira rose, collected her scuffed backpack, from where Grant had pushed it earlier under the table. During the morning's theater, someone had pawed through it, homework crumpled, pencils scattered, a photo of Kira with her grandmother bent at the corner. She knelt, gathered each item carefully, restoring order the way people do when they have had too much chaos forced on them. Sophia hovered, throat tight, unsure what part to play when the momentum finally shifted sides. Lena watched Kira's hands. No tremor, no hitch. After a night in juvenile lockup, a public farce, a slap, the steadiness felt like defiance. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. Kira looked up from the bag. "Sure." "Why didn't you swing back?" Kira considered. "Because if I did, it'd be a story about me losing my temper." Staying still made it about him losing. His Lena smiled for the first time all day. "That's wisdom." "My grandma taught me," Kira said. "She says sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people show you who they are. Then nobody can pretend they didn't see it." "Your grandmother sounds sharp," Lena said. "Sharpest person I know." Kira slung the bag over her shoulder and glanced around, peeling paint, broken clock, an empty bench suddenly smaller without robes behind it. "Will things change here?" "They already are," Lena said. "Federal oversight, new judge, new prosecutor, mandatory cameras, external review, different rules, different habits." Kira nodded once. "Good." She hesitated at the aisle. "Agent Park, what about Mr. Robinson?" The man in the video, Lena's expression warmed. "He's recovering. His family filed a civil rights claim, likely a substantial settlement, but more importantly, a record on paper, not just online." "He seemed kind," Kira said. She headed out, chin up, shoulders squared. 16 going on unbreakable. Lena tracked her to the door, then turned to Sophia, who still looked astonished and a little heartbroken. "You did good today," Lena said. Sophia shook her head. "I did nothing. I was useless." "You believed your client when others wouldn't," Lena said. "You pushed even when the deck was rigged. That matters," Sophia swallowed. "I was still going to lose." "And I was still going to be here," Lena said, "partly because lawyers like you keep showing up, even when the math says don't. Don't quit. The work needs people too stubborn to stop outside. The news vans arrived like weather. Somebody had tipped them. Tripods sprouted across the sidewalk. Reporters rehearsed live-in-one shots. Producers barked into headsets. A drone buzzed high, hunting a legal shot. Kira was already gone, scooped up by her mother in a dented Honda with a sticker that read, "Be kind." Lena stood on the courthouse steps and watched the circus spin up. Her phone vibrated like a trapped bee. HQ, partner lines, U.S. Attorney's Office, press liaisons wanting approved language. For a breath or two, she let it all ring. She thought about a 17-year-old who refused to pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen, and made the whole city look with her. 3 weeks later, back in a cramped FBI cubicle, Lena received a small package with neat block letters. It was from Kyra, now returned to school, trying to paste a normal schedule over an abnormal month. Inside, a handwritten note and a clipped article. "Dear Agent Park," the letter began, "thank you for everything. Mr. Robinson's doing better. I visited him and his family last weekend. He doesn't remember much, but his daughter says he's healing. School's weird. Some kids stare, most are kind. A couple asked me to help with a civil rights project. I said yes. The handwriting was careful, the lines straight. It felt like someone building a bridge plank by plank. My social studies teacher, Miss Alvarez," the letter continued, "played your press conference. She said what happened showed how the system should work when people don't give up." Kira wrote about thinking ahead. "I've been wondering what to do with my life. I think I want to be a lawyer, but not the kind who counts billable hours, the kind who takes cases that matter. My grandmother says I should ask you if that's a good idea. What do you think?" The article beneath the letter read, "Federal probe triggers, major corruption charges." It covered the arrests, the suspension, the resignation. A smaller piece below, "Local teen returns to class after courtroom firestorm." The bottom story was short, But the last line made Lena laugh out loud at her desk for the first time in weeks. Asked what she planned to do next, Kira had said, "My homework, same as everyone." Lena dialed the number Kira had written in ink that bled a little. "Hello," came that familiar voice, bright but cautious. "Kira, it's Agent Park. I got you your letter." "I wasn't sure you'd have time," Kira said. "I'll always have time for letters from friends," Lena said. "And yes, about law. I think you'd be good at it. The kind that matters really?" Kira asked. "Really?" Lena said. "You've already shown the most important trait." "What's that?" "Courage," Lena said. "The quiet kind. Standing in the right place and holding a line when it'd be easier to sit down." Silence on the line, soft as a smile. "Agent Park, can I ask something?" "Of course." "Do you think what happened to me will happen to other kids?" Lena didn't answer fast. "I hope not. But if it does, I hope they remember your example. One person with a camera and a backbone can tilt a system." "I hope so too," Kira said. They hung up. Lena sat back and let the office noise blur. The case wasn't over. It had only changed shape. Outcomes followed. Rios pled out on federal civil rights counts, 3 years in prison, mandated restitution, barred from serving again. Judge Miles lost the robe, and after an inquiry, her law license. Cho resigned under pressure, and later faced charges of obstruction tied to a pattern of burying misconduct. The courthouse fitted new bones, new presiding judge, new intake policies, body cam mandates, outside audits, defensive training rewired to emphasize de-escalation. Lena knew policy wasn't a cure, it was a scaffold. But it meant the next kid might not have to bleed to be believed. That alone felt like oxygen after months breathing under a wet towel. The Bureau added a permanent civil rights desk downtown, monitoring, hotlines, a small team with a mandate to tug on threads early. The victory wasn't just punishments, it was the stubborn insistence that a single teen's footage mattered enough to reorder a courthouse. 6 months later, an envelope arrived, heavy paper with a crimson crest. Kira's school invited Lena to deliver remarks at commencement. Kira, valedictorian, had been accepted to multiple universities on full scholarships. On stage, cap-angled, she spoke like someone walking a beam with perfect balance. She talked about telling the truth, about naming harm when you see it, about the cost of silence and the heavier cost of complicity. "People ask if I regret filming," Kira said, voice steady in the humid gym. "I don't. Staying silent doesn't make you safe. It makes you part of the harm." The auditorium stood, applause going on until it turned from celebration to a vow they didn't realize they were making. After, Lena found Kira in a thicket of hugs and flowers. "Your grandmother would be proud," Lena said. "She is," Kira grinned. "She marched in the 60s. Says every generation fights the same battles in new ways." Lena nodded. "She's right." Kira squeezed Lena's hand. "She also says thanks for showing me the system can work if the right people refuse to look away." "The system works when people like you refuse to let it fail," Lena said. Around them, cameras flashed. Cousins argued about pizza. Someone misplaced a tassel. Kira posed with her mother, her grandmother, friends who'd stood next to her when the hallways felt like a different courtroom. Lena stepped back, taking it in. This ordinary miracle of caps and gowns and jokes about summer jobs. In a few months, Kira would leave for college. In a few years, law school would sharpen her instincts into tools. Someday, she'd stand at a defense table or behind a lectern, making someone braver just by standing there. That's how momentum multiplies, one person at a time. What started as a teenager hitting record outside a corner market had become something else. Proof that regular people can be levers, that institutions can be moved if enough weight is applied in the right place. It became a reminder that silence is a choice and so is witness. It became hope. Steady, unspectacular, necessary. That the next group of kids is already paying attention and won't settle for the world as delivered. Lena drove home that night thinking about courage, not parades or headlines, but the quiet version, the kind that doesn't announce itself and still rearranges the furniture of a room, a day, a city. She thought of courage like a muscle, You build it with repetitions, holding a camera when your hands shake, speaking once when your throat is dry, saying no, and then saying it again when someone says you don't belong. She thought of how many people had nudged the story along. The neighbor who called Lena back a second time, the clerk who kept good copies, the analyst who stayed past midnight to confirm timestamps, the teacher who turned a press conference into a lesson. None of it looked heroic from the inside. All of it added up to something that changed how a courtroom felt on a Tuesday afternoon. Later, in a quieter season, Lena met Kira and her grandmother for tea at a tiny shop tucked behind the bus station. The grandmother's hands were small and strong. Her stories had edges. She talked about crossing bridges and being chased, about singing when it was the only weapon she had. "Tools change," she said, tapping Kira's phone on the table. "Truth doesn't." Kira listened the way she filmed, carefully, without inserting herself in front of the subject. Lena left with a paper bag of lemon cookies and a reminder she hadn't known she needed. Progress is a relay. You don't carry the baton forever. You carry it long enough. At work, the civil rights tip line pinged with new reports, some trivial, some complicated, none ignorable. A mother worried about her son's traffic stop, a public defender flagging a pattern in a patrol unit's affidavits, a teenager asking if it's legal to record outside a school resource officer's office. Lena and her small squad triaged, coached, documented, escalated. The day-to-day lacked the crisp drama of a courtroom arrest, but it was the work, boring, relentless, essential, the kind of labor that keeps the next spark from becoming a wildfire, or at least builds a fire break, so the damage can't pretend it was inevitable. When the civil suit settled, Mr. Sue, Robinson's daughter, sent a note. "He doesn't remember the fall," she wrote. "He remembers good moments, my son's baseball game, the neighbor's dog." They'd used part of the settlement to retrofit the house, grab bars, better lighting, a ramp. "He moves safer now," she wrote, "and the city sent someone to talk about dementia response training for officers." Lena read the note twice. Progress is often a bureaucratic word. Here it felt like a new railing on a staircase someone actually needed. She pinned the note above her monitor with blue tape and tried not to cry at her desk where everyone could see. One afternoon, a local paper ran a profile on the girls of Fifth Avenue, Kira and two classmates who'd started an after-school legal literacy club. They taught peers how to ask for a lawyer, how to stay safe and still keep the record clean, how to file complaints that didn't vanish. The photos showed kids bent over handouts, laughing in the margins of hard conversations. "We want our friends to know the script before they need it," Kira told the reporter. It was not glamorous, but it was power, distributed, demystified, shared. Lena clipped the article, tucked it next to Mr. Robinson's note, a small collage of reasons to keep showing up. The state legislature, sensing wind change, passed a modest package. Clear rules on filming police, penalties for tampering with civilian recordings, funding for crisis response teams. It wasn't everything, and it wouldn't have passed without months of pressure, but it made the ground tilt a degree toward fairness. Lena testified once, briefly, answering questions cleanly, refusing to perform for cameras. Afterward, in the hallway, a teenager in a hoodie asked for a selfie. "My sister thinks you're a superhero," he said. Lena laughed. "Tell her I'm mostly paperwork," he grinned. "Paperwork saved my cousin's case." The elevator dinged. Some victories, ride down with you in silence. Kira phoned occasionally, quick updates between classes. "I'm taking a constitutional law seminar," she said once, equal parts proud and annoyed. "The professor smiles every time I say compelled speech." Another time, "We watched old footage from the 60s. My grandma cried. I understood why, and I visited Mr. Robinson again. He asked the same question 3 times. I answered like it was the first time. That felt important. Lena listened more than she spoke, offering a nudge here and there, never touching the steering wheel. Mentorship, she decided, is mostly walking beside someone and handing them water when the hill gets steeper. On a gray Sunday, Lena sat with her partner and sorted mail. A glossy flyer hawked a community police barbecue. She felt her jaw tighten, and then forced it to relax. Bridges are built with hamburgers sometimes. Not every solution has to be severe. She went. Kids chased each other through a sprinkler. An officer let them try on his hat and then listened while a grandmother told him what fear felt like. It wasn't a miracle. It was an hour where no one pretended the past hadn't happened and no one insisted the future be the same. Sometimes that's enough scaffolding for something better. The following spring, Lena guest lectured at Ms. Alvarez's class. Kira introduced her with a grin and an eye roll that said, "We're friends, but I'm still going to clown you a little." Lena told the students what to do when their heart is pounding and the person in front of them has a badge and bad temper. "Your phone is a tool," she said. "So is your voice. So is silence. Pick the right one for the moment." Hands shot up. The questions were smart, edged with lived experience. After a girl lingered, "I thought I was the only one who saw what I saw," she said softly. Lena shook her head. "You aren't." That summer, a different courthouse tried to bury a similar video. It didn't work. The community had the script now. Preserve, backup, mirror, publish. Lawyers filed proper motions with better affidavits. Judges who'd once waved away footage now cited precedents nervous colleagues had created. Rios's name appeared in training slides as a cautionary tale. Miles became a footnote in a judicial ethics seminar. Cho's resignation turned into a law school case study on prosecutorial discretion and its outer limits. Progress, Lena realized, often looks like a list of people who are no longer allowed to do old harm in the old ways without anyone noticing. By fall, Kira had moved into a cramped dorm with a view of a brick wall and a sliver of sky. She texted photos of stacked books and ramen improvisations that would horrify nutritionists. "I joined the legal aid clinic," she wrote. "We help tenants fight illegal evictions." On video calls, she looked tired and alive. Her grandmother mailed care packages with tea and index cards. "Use the cards," the note said. "Write the words that matter." Carry them. Kira taped one above her desk. "The right to document is the right to remember." She taped another on the door. "Believe what you see, not what they shout at you." On a late bus home, Lena watched two teens argue in the back about something that didn't matter and something that probably did. She thought of how many fights would never start if people felt seen. She thought of cameras again, how they can be shields or swords or mirrors. She thought of the first time she'd been told to put hers away and the first time she didn't. She texted Kira a photo of the bus aisle and a single line, "Keep going." Kira replied with a thumbs up, and then, a minute later, "You too." The bus rocked, the city moved, no violins, just night and streetlights and people trying. Winter was a quieter chapter. The federal office ran trainings in church basements and rec centers, places with folding chairs and coffee that tasted like punishment. Attendance grew. People asked better questions. Officers showed up sometimes off duty, hands jammed in pockets, faces careful. After one session, a sergeant stayed back. "You're not wrong," he said, voice low. "Culture eats policy. We're trying to change what gets celebrated." Lena nodded. "Keep going." He asked, "You ever get tired?" "Yes," she said, "all the time." They smiled like tired runners at mile 20, not finishers, but people who knew where the road was and weren't leaving it. That spring, a judge Lena respected, one who'd listened more than she spoke, asked for input on a pilot program. A public ombudsperson sitting in on arraignments where use of force charges intersected with civilian recordings. It sounded small. It also sounded like oxygen. "Yes," Lena said, "do it." She watched the first session from the back. The ombudsperson took notes, asked two clarifying questions, and the prosecutor adjusted a claim that would have skated by a year earlier. Tiny hinge, big door. Lena texted Kira afterward. "Little wind stack," Kira replied. "My professor says precedent is just a pile of little winds tall enough to see over the fence." When Rios's sentencing date arrived, Lena didn't go. She didn't need to see him in cuffs again. She sat in her office and wrote a memo recommending broader training, including scenarios where teenagers filming aren't the threat. She cited data and the case, she included a paragraph about grace because systems also need doorways for people who want to walk out of bad habits. It wasn't soft, it was strategic. If there's no path to better, people stay worse. She sent the memo. Then she ate a granola bar she didn't want and laughed at herself for crying over a paragraph no one would notice. Graduation season returned. Lena walked across a high school lawn that smelled like cut grass and sunscreen. Kira, robe swishing, hugged her hard. "We did it," she said, then laughed. "Okay, I did it, but you get a little credit." "You did it," Lena agreed. Kyra's speech landed like a set of clean chords. She talked about being scared and doing the thing anyway, about the difference between being loud and being heard, about the quiet choices that add up. The ovation went on long enough to become ridiculous, then sweet again. The grandmother wiped her eyes. Kira saluted her with the corner of her cap. After photos, Kira leaned close. "I got into the summer program at the legal aid clinic," she said. "They're going to pay me in actual money, not just vibes." Lena laughed. "Look at you, paid justice." Kira grinned. "My grandma says the rent won't care how noble I feel." They took a selfie, two women at different mile markers on the same road, sun making them squint. Lena drove home with the window cracked, letting hot air roll over her arm. She didn't turn on the radio. She let the day replay in her head in full color, saving it on the shelf where she kept good things. A week later, a freshman from Kyra's school emailed Lena a video. "I filmed this," the subject line read. It showed an officer barking at a kid outside a bodega, then calming when he noticed the lens, then choosing better words. No shove, no crack of a slap. The kid got to walk away mad, but intact. "I think it mattered that I had my phone," the freshman wrote. Lena replied, "It mattered." She watched the clip again, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to remember how a simple rectangle of glass could change an outcome without the word viral ever entering the conversation. There were setbacks. A different judge tossed a case for nonsense reasons. A body cam failed at an inconvenient moment. An internal affairs captain retired right before a report landed. Lena swore in private and then drafted the next set of letters in public voice. The work wasn't the work if it only ran downhill. Kira called on a night when a clinic client was evicted despite everything. "We lost," she said. "We will again," Lena said, "and then we'll win next time. It's all one story." "I hate that," Kira said, half laughing, half crying. "Me too," Lena said. "Hate it and keep going. Both things can be true." The next month, Kira sent a photo of a tiny trophy the clinic gave student volunteers, a stamped metal camera on a wooden block. The plate read, "See something, save something." "Cheesy?" Kira texted. "Perfect," Lena wrote back. "Put it on a shelf where you trip over it." Kira replied with a picture of it perched above her desk, next to a plant that kept almost dying and then reviving. Lena liked that plant. She liked anything that refused to quit. She looked around her own office at taped notes and clippings, at the warrant copy framed not as a victory lap, but as a reminder of the day a room changed shape. That evening, Lena parked outside her apartment building and rested her forehead on the wheel for a beat. The sun was almost gone. She thought about tall, loud courage, the kind plastered on posters, and about the other kind that slips in wearing sneakers and gets things done. She thought about Kira's calm after the slap, the sentence that turned the narrative inside out. She thought about the clerk's shaky hands delivering a note, about Grant's steady presence, about Sophia finding a firmer voice by the end. Most of all, she thought about the way a kid's unblinking stare made a man show the world who he was. She carried grocery bags upstairs, coffee, fruit, a stubborn head of lettuce, and smiled at the ordinariness of it. She put the kettle on. From the living room, the city hummed through her window like a good engine. She texted Kira one more time. "Proud of you." Kira answered with a photo of her grandma's old teacup on a stack of casebooks and 3 words, "Proud of us." Lena sat down and let the sentence settle like a small weight in her hands, the good kind that keeps papers from blowing away when the window's open. She thought of the long work ahead and didn't flinch. Somewhere, another kid was walking home from school, phone in a pocket, eyes open. Somewhere, a rookie officer was deciding whether to posture or to listen. Somewhere, a judge would decide a motion fairly because the last judge didn't. That's how culture shifts, by inches, then blocks. Lena blew on her tea, burned her lip anyway, and laughed at herself. She pictured Kyra behind a podium, a few years from now, arguments neat as origami, a room learning to reconsider its reflexes. She pictured Mr. Robinson's cane propped by a door waiting for morning. She pictured a world where dignity wasn't a negotiation. As Lena turned off the light and the apartment slid into soft dark, she understood what Kira had taught her. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty or protecting the innocent. It's about building a place where teenagers can walk home without witnessing brutality, where filming wrongdoing doesn't put handcuffs on the witness, where the system guards people instead of people guarding the system. And sometimes it starts with one person who refuses to look lesson one. Quiet courage changes outcomes. If you're 65 or older, you've watched America cycle through hard lessons, some learned, some stubborn. You remember grainy TV pictures from the 60s, front-page headlines, leaders who rose and fell. But you also know that the most decisive moments often arrive without fanfare. A porch light turned on for a neighbor, a hand raised in a meeting, a single voice saying, "That isn't right." In Courtroom 12B, the moment of change began with quiet courage. 17-year-old Kyra stood 30 feet away on a public sidewalk, about 10 paces, and pressed record. She didn't yell. She didn't crowd the scene. She simply documented. When a uniformed officer shoved an 84-year-old man to the pavement and later slapped Kira inside that overheated courtroom, she refused to swing back. She kept her eyes forward and her words clean. That was a mistake. For those of us who have lived long enough to see tempers burn hot and then cool, Kira's restraint is more than youthful poise. It's strategy any elder recognizes. Sometimes the strongest move is stillness. Sometimes the most persuasive sentence is the one spoken without heat. And sometimes the tool that keeps truth from being buried is a simple rectangle of glass in your pocket, stored, mirrored, backed up, like a good paper trail you'd keep in a file cabinet. Older Americans understand the stakes. We know what it means to be told, "Don't make trouble," and we remember how trouble thrives in silence. Kira didn't chase a fight. She insisted on a record. You can feel the cost in her split lip and bruised wrists, and still she chose calm. Her grandmother taught her a lesson our generation knows well. Let people show you who they are, and don't let anyone pretend they didn't see it. That kind of courage isn't noisy, it's precise. It's the difference between an angry scene that fades and a documented truth that endures. Lesson 2. Institutions bend. When prepared, people hold the line. Change did not arrive because one person shouted the loudest. It arrived because people prepared for it. Special Agent Lena Park spent 6 months mapping patterns, cross-checking complaints, and building a case strong enough to walk into a hostile room. Her watch was more than jewelry. It was a live feed to a safe room downtown, a 21st century version of the meticulous note-taking many of you practiced at work. Timestamps, copies, corroboration. When the deputy crossed the line and struck a minor, Lena didn't grandstand. She produced a warrant signed by a chief judge, called in agents, and named the charges: assault under color of law and conspiracy to deprive rights. Calm, lawful, documented. If you came of age during Watergate, if you ever clipped articles for your records, you'll recognize the discipline. Preparation beats bluster. In 12B, that discipline exposed a machine, a prosecutor who never seemed to see misconduct, a judge whose rulings leaned one way every time, and a veteran officer with a file cabinet full of dust-covered complaints. It also revealed the decent cogs, Bailiff Grant, who treated people like people, a brand new public defender, Sophia, who kept standing even as objections piled up, a teacher, Miss Alvarez, who turned a press conference into a civics lesson. Institutions are not faceless, They are built of choices by hundreds of people. When enough of those choices tilt toward fairness, documenting, backing up, testifying, they bend the system. There's a practical takeaway here for every older American who mentors a grandchild or volunteers at a community center. Teach the script before anyone needs it, where to stand at a safe distance, what to say. I'm on a public sidewalk. I'm allowed to record. When to stay quiet and when to speak. Show them how to store evidence in more than one place, how to write down dates and names, how to follow up in writing. It is not paranoia, it's prudence, the same prudence that kept your receipts, your medical records, your mortgage papers in labeled folders. In the story of 12B, preparation was not glamorous, but it was decisive. Lesson 3. Real reform is maintenance, not a moment. Headlines: Love a raid in a courthouse and a pair of shiny handcuffs. Real life is slower. After the arrest, policy changed in inches, mandatory cameras with fewer loopholes, external review of force, an ombudsperson quietly seated at key hearings, promotion criteria that rewarded de-escalation rather than body counts on a spreadsheet. The FBI set up a permanent civil rights desk. A state bill clarified the right to record and penalize tampering. In Mr. Robinson's home, grab bars were installed. A ramp added. Simple improvements that keep an elder safer on a Tuesday morning. In church basements with folding chairs and bad coffee, neighbors learned how to preserve videos and file complaints that don't vanish. A community police barbecue that could have been sugary PR turned into something modest but useful. An hour where no one pretended history hadn't happened, and no one insisted the future be the same. And there were setbacks. A body cam failed at the wrong time. A different judge tossed a case on thin reasoning. A good memo felt like throwing a pebble at a freight train. If you have ever tended a garden through August heat, or kept a house standing through winters and roof leaks, you know this rhythm. Fix, check, repeat. Reform is maintenance. The wins are small and stackable, like the freshman who filmed an encounter outside a bodega and, because the lens was present, watched an officer choose better words. No viral clip, no grand speech, just a kid who went home unhurt because the culture had shifted an inch. For older readers, the question is legacy. What do we hand the next generation, our children and their children? We hand them tools and habits. We hand them stories of restraint that made room for truth, templates for complaints that can't be ignored, and a working definition of courage that doesn't need a parade. We tell them what Kira learned at 17. Staying still can keep the story about the person who did wrong, not the person who recorded it. We model what Lena practiced. Bring receipts, warrants, logs, corroboration, and act without theatrics. We remind them what Mr. Robinson's daughter showed us. Progress is a new railing by the stairs, and an officer trained to recognize dementia before he reaches for force. In Courtroom 12, but the clock on the wall was frozen since 2019, as if time itself had given up on that room. But time didn't stop. A witness pressed record. An agent pressed the case. A judge who once waved away videos lost her robe. A prosecutor who never saw a pattern finally met one. A department rewired its training. A teenager started a legal literacy club, and an 84-year-old man went home to a safer house. That's not a miracle. That's maintenance, done by people who refuse to look away. For those of us with more years behind us than ahead, this is familiar terrain. We've learned that dignity is not guaranteed by age, title, or a brass nameplate. It's secured by neighbors who act when the moment asks, by records that outlast spin, and by 1,000 unglamorous follow-ups. Justice is not a thing we win once. It's a place we keep in good repair. Hand your grandchildren a small, sturdy truth. Tools change. Truth doesn't then look them in the eye and add, carry both. Friends, if this story moved you, I'd love to hear your wisdom. Many of you marched, voted, taught, and raised families through seasons when justice felt fragile and hard-won. In your experience, what kind of courage changes outcomes the most? The quiet kind that holds a steady line, or the loud kind that forces the room to pay attention? If you were standing in Courtroom 12B, Would you have chosen Kyra's stillness, Lena's preparation, or something else entirely? Tell us about a moment, large or small, when you witnessed wrong and did one practical thing to set it right: a phone call, a note for the record, a calm word that shifted the temperature 5 degrees. Your stories teach the next generation how to act when it's their turn. Please like this video if the lessons resonated, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you won't miss the next conversation. Drop a comment with your advice for younger viewers: what to say, where to stand, how to stay safe, and still speak up. Your voice may be the guidance someone needs tomorrow.
This is a fictionalized performance. No real people, cases, or events are depicted. This video is not news, not a documentary, and not based on real events. It is a creative storytelling approach aided by artificial intelligence.